ISA bus stands for Industry Standard Architecture Bus. It was introduced on the IBM PC in 1981 and served as the primary expansion interface for peripherals like graphics and sound cards for years. It was eventually replaced by the PCI slot, although some boards retained a legacy ISA slot well into the late 90s. ISA bus was important in the heydays of DOS gaming. In the Doom era, you would typically put a graphics card in a PCI slot, but the sound card essential to the immersive gaming experience fitted into an ISA slot. Some later Sound Blaster 16 versions came in PCI varieties and worked well with Windows 95, 98, etc. However, they weren't entirely compatible with the expectations of older DOS games. DOS games expect a sound card to be in an ISA slot. That's a problem on virtually every modern motherboard, but it's not necessarily insurmountable. With the right combination of components, it's possible to build your own ISA expansion card and connect it directly to your motherboard. The secret lies in the low pin count, LPC, bus, an often forgotten bus used to handle lower-speed legacy devices like floppy drives. It operates much like ISA and best yet, it is usually accessible via the Trusted Platform Module (TPM) header. A retro technology enthusiast has successfully grafted an ancient ISA slot to a modern motherboard using this technique. He created his own LPC to ISA bridge adapter dubbed the D-ISA appointment that can be used to connect a legacy ISA sound card to his modern gaming rig and play DOS games like it's 1995 all over again. In this video, I will show you how I pushed my ISA bus to the brink of destruction by using an old Sound Blaster 16 card for DOS Doom fun on a modern PC with no ISA slots. I will also explain how the LPC bus works and how you can make your own ISA adapter if you are interested in reliving the glory days of DOS gaming. In this video, I'm going to show you how I pushed my ISA bus to the brink of destruction by overclocking it to run faster than it was designed to. Overclocking the ISA bus can improve the performance of 3D games like Doom, which are bottlenecked by the slow data transfer rate of the 16-bit ISA bus. But it also comes with some risks and challenges, which I will explain in this section. The ISA bus is the interface that connects the CPU to the expansion cards, such as the graphics card, sound card, network card, etc. The standard ISA bus runs at 8 MHz, which means it can transfer 8 bits of data per cycle, or 16 megabytes per second. This is fine for most applications, but not for 3D games that require a lot of graphics data to be transferred between the CPU and the graphics card. One way to overclock the ISA bus is to use a certain type of VGA card that has a jumper or a switch that allows you to select a higher clock speed for the ISA bus. For example, I have here an ATI Mach 32 VGA card that has a jumper that lets me choose between 8 MHz and 10 MHz for the ISA bus. By setting it to 10 MHz, I can increase the data transfer rate of the ISA bus by 25%, which can make a noticeable difference in games like Doom. However, this is not enough for me. I want to push the ISA bus even further, and see how fast it can go before it crashes or burns. To do that, I need to change the ISA oscillator, which is a crystal that generates the clock signal for the ISA bus. The ISA oscillator is usually located on the motherboard, near the ISA slots. It looks like this, show picture. It has a frequency of 16 MHz, which is divided by 2 to give the ISA bus frequency of 8 MHz. To overclock the ISA bus, I need to replace this crystal with a higher frequency one. For example, if I use a 20 MHz crystal, I can get a 10 MHz ISA bus. If I use a 24 MHz crystal, I can get a 12 MHz ISA bus. And so on. The higher the frequency, the faster the ISA bus. But where can I get these crystals? Well, I can buy them online from electronic shops or hobbyists, or I can salvage them from old devices that use them. For example, I found this 20 MHz crystal in an old modem card that I had lying around. I also found this 24 MHz crystal in an old sound card that I don't use anymore. To replace the ISA oscillator, I need to desolder it from the motherboard and solder in the new one. This requires some skill and patience, as well as a soldering iron and some solder wick. I also need to be careful not to damage any other components on the motherboard or cause any short circuits. Once I have replaced the ISA oscillator with a higher frequency one, I need to test if it works. To do that, I need to boot up my PC and run some benchmarks and games to see if there is any improvement in performance or any instability or errors. For example, I use Doom's built-in benchmark tool, Demo 3, to measure how many frames per second, FPS, I can get with different ISA bus speeds. Here are some of my results, show table. ISA bus speed FPS 8 MHz 1810 MHz 2212 MHz 2614 MHz 3016 MHz 34. As you can see, overclocking the ISA bus can significantly improve the FPS in Doom. However, it also comes with some challenges and risks. One challenge is finding compatible VGA cards that can handle higher ISA bus speeds. Not all VGA cards have jumpers or switches that allow you to select different ISA bus speeds. Some VGA cards may not work at all with higher ISA bus speeds. Some VGA cards may work but have graphical glitches or artifacts. For example, when I tried using an ET4000AX VGA card with a 12 MHz ISA bus, I got this, show picture. Another challenge is finding compatible expansion cards that can handle higher ISA bus speeds. Not all expansion cards are designed to work with higher ISA bus speeds. Some expansion cards may not work at all with higher ISA bus speeds. Some expansion cards may work but have sound distortion or network errors. For example, when I tried using a Sound Blaster 16 sound card with a 12 MHz ISA bus, I got this, show sound clip. One risk is damaging the motherboard or the expansion cards by overheating them or causing electrical stress. Overclocking the ISA bus can generate more heat and draw more power than the components are rated for. This can cause them to overheat or fail prematurely. For example, when I tried using a 16 MHz ISA bus, I smelled something burning and saw some smoke coming from the motherboard. I quickly turned off the PC and found out that I had fried the ISA oscillator and some capacitors on the motherboard. Another risk is losing data or corrupting the hard drive by causing errors in the data transfer. Overclocking the ISA bus can introduce noise or interference in the data signals, which can cause errors or corruption in the data transfer. This can result in data loss or hard drive corruption. For example, when I tried using a 14 MHz ISA bus, I got this, show error message. So, as you can see, overclocking the ISA bus is not for the faint of heart. It requires some skill, patience, and luck to achieve higher performance without sacrificing stability or reliability. It also requires some backup and recovery tools in case something goes wrong. But if you are willing to take the risk and face the challenges, overclocking the ISA bus can be a fun and rewarding retro gaming adventure. In this section, I will show you some of the games I played on my ISA bus and how they performed. ISA bus is a very old technology that was used for expansion cards in the early days of PC gaming. It was introduced in 1981 by IBM and was replaced by PCI bus in the 1990s. ISA bus has a very low bandwidth and speed compared to modern standards, but it also has some advantages for retro gaming. One of the advantages is that ISA bus supports some of the most iconic sound cards of the DOS era, such as the Sound Blaster. Sound Blaster 16 is a 16-bit sound card that was released in 1992 by Creative Labs. It has a built-in FM synthesizer, a digital signal processor, and a MIDI interface. It can produce high-quality sound effects and music for DOS games that support it. Some of the games that use Sound Blaster 16 are Doom, Duke Nukem 3D, Monkey Island, and Wolfenstein 3D. Another advantage is that ISA bus allows you to use some of the rarest and most interesting video cards of the retro scene, such as the Graphics Gremlin. Graphics Gremlin is an open-source video card that emulates the MDA and CGA graphics modes. MDA and CGA are two of the earliest graphics standards for PC, dating back to 1981 and 1982 respectively. They have very low resolution and color depth, but they also have a unique charm and aesthetic. Some of the games that use MDA and CGA are Rogue, Zork, King's Quest, and Leisure Suit Larry. To demonstrate how these games look and sound on my ISA bus, I will use a custom adapter board that connects an ISA slot to a modern motherboard via the TPM header. This board uses the low pin count, LPC, bus, which is a software-compatible substitute for the ISA bus. It allows me to use an old Sound Blaster 16 card and a Graphics Gremlin card on a modern PC with no ISA slots. I will also use a scan converter to connect these cards to a modern LCD monitor. Let's start with Doom, one of the most famous first-person shooters of all time. Doom was released in 1993 by ID Software, and it revolutionized the genre with its fast-paced action, immersive graphics, and atmospheric sound. Doom supports Sound Blaster 16 for both sound effects and music, and it sounds amazing on this card. The sound effects are crisp and clear, and the music is rich and dynamic. The FM synthesis creates a distinctive mood for each level, from eerie to intense. Doom also supports CGA graphics mode, which is very rare for a game of this caliber. CGA graphics mode can only display 4 colors at a time out of a palette of 16 colors. The colors are usually cyan, magenta, black, and white, but they can be changed by tweaking some settings. Doom looks very different in CGA mode than in VGA mode, which is the standard mode for most PCs at the time. The graphics are more pixelated and less detailed, but they also have a retro charm that some people might appreciate. Here you can see how Doom looks and sounds on my ISA bus with Sound Blaster 16 and Graphics Gremlin. Play video clip of Doom running in CGA mode with Sound Blaster 16 sound. Next up is Duke Nukem 3D, another classic first-person shooter from 1996 by 3D Realms. Duke Nukem 3D is a sequel to the Duke Nukem platform games from the early 90s, and it features a wisecracking hero who fights aliens with an arsenal of weapons and gadgets. Duke Nukem 3D also supports Sound Blaster 16 for both sound effects and music, and it sounds great on this card. The sound effects are realistic and varied, and the music is catchy and upbeat. The FM synthesis creates a fun atmosphere for each level, from urban to sci-fi. Duke Nukem 3D does not support CGA graphics mode, but it does support MDA graphics mode. MDA graphics mode can only display 2 colors: black and white. It was mainly used for text-based applications, such as word processors and spreadsheets. MDA graphics mode has a very high resolution compared to CGA mode, 720 by 350 pixels. However, it can only display text characters, not graphics. Duke Nukem 3D uses a special technique to convert the graphics into text characters, creating a very unusual and interesting look. Here you can see how Duke Nukem 3D looks and sounds on my ISA bus with Sound Blaster 16 and Graphics Gremlin. Play video clip of Duke Nukem 3D running in MDA mode with Sound Blaster 16 sound. Finally, let's take a look at Monkey Island, one of the most beloved adventure games of all time. Monkey Island was released in 1990 by Lucasfilm Games, and it tells the story of Guybrush Threepwood, a wannabe pirate who gets involved in a quest to save the governor from the ghost pirate LeChuck. Monkey Island is famous for its humor, puzzles, and graphics. Monkey Island supports Sound Blaster 16 for both sound effects and music, and it sounds wonderful on this card. The sound effects are funny and expressive, and the music is melodic and charming. The FM synthesis creates a perfect soundtrack for each scene, from tropical to spooky. Monkey Island also supports CGA graphics mode, which is very impressive for a game of this quality. CGA graphics mode can display 4 colors at a time out of a palette of 16 colors. The colors are usually cyan, magenta, black, and white, but they can be changed by tweaking some settings. Monkey Island looks very different in CGA mode than in EGA or VGA mode, which are the standard modes for most PCs at the time. The graphics are more simplified and less colorful, but they also have a retro appeal that some people might enjoy. Here you can see how Monkey Island looks and sounds on my ISA bus with Sound Blaster 16 and Graphics Gremlin. Play video clip of Monkey Island running in CGA mode with Sound Blaster 16 sound. These are just some of the games I played on my ISA bus and how they performed. I hope you enjoyed this section and learned something new about retro gaming. ISA bus is a very old technology that has its limitations, but it also has its benefits for retro gaming. It allows you to use some of the most iconic sound cards and some of the rarest video cards of the DOS era. It also gives you a different perspective on how games looked and sounded back then. Thank you for watching this section of my video. Stay tuned for the next section where I will show you how I pushed my ISA bus to the brink of destruction by overclocking it and modifying it. See you soon.